IB Nation Sports Talk up and rolling. It's Wednesday, and that means Mailbag Day, along with Vince D'Addario, Sean Stiers. We've got a slew, and I mean a slew of questions starred up and ready to go for our mailbag today. We're excited to answer them. Brian and Trevor did a buy, sell, hold show today. They talked a little about Notre Dame football practice. That's what you want to call it. But we were there, and I've also got
practice to them. It's not really a practice to you guys.
Yeah, what we saw, like
you see a tease. You got teased. That's what you get.
Yeah, we saw the teaser is what we saw.
Correct.
Today. I guess with any luck, I won't be able to see the actual real practice because if Notre Dame women's basketball goes to the Final Four, I won't be at the real we think is going to be a real practice next week at the end of next week. But we will see. We will see.
There's lots of different things about what that day could potentially look like, and most of it's not what I want to hear.
Changing? Is it changing by the minute kind of thing?
It's like, normally that particular practice is a scrimmage of some sort, the jersey scrimmage. Everybody
was last year anyway. Yeah.
I'm hearing rumblings that might not be the case. Just a regular old practice, but we'll see.
Yeah. So we do have some post-practice audio, some clips from offensive line coach Joe Rudolph, from offensive lineman Charles Jagusah, as well as defensive line coach Al Washington. That's all coming up in rapid fire. Should be an exciting rapid fire today. One programming note for this here show. We won't have a live show tomorrow because I will be traveling.
Yep.
And I believe you have an existing conflict.
I do.
So that means Jesse, I don't think Jesse is up for the solo show tomorrow. Yeah. But there's good news. There's good news. While we won't have a live show tomorrow, coming up tomorrow on both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform, wherever it happens to be, I've got a one-on-one interview coming up with the one and only Sonia Citron. So that is coming up tomorrow.
Did the third party not make it?
Yeah, I don't know all the details. I think of like scheduling and that kind of stuff because there's a lot of things. There were a lot of moving parts just for Sony and I to be able to get together. We recorded it today, and you will hear it tomorrow. So
perfect timing.
Yes, we talk about a lot of things. Obviously, her career. Being in the Sweet 16, kind of wrapping up the home season at, not just home season, but her home career at Notre Dame. And then little teasers of TCU coming up this weekend as well.
Did you talk about, because I saw a mock draft where she goes number 2 in the draft. So
really?
Yeah, I did. So I didn't know.
Well, we did talk about the fact that Dallas has 2 first-round picks. They pick first and they pick last in the first round of the draft.
Well, I hope she's not the last pick.
So if she's number 2, that might be a disappointment to her because we also did talk about her friend Maris Leofau at the end there. So
you sound like a grandparent. Oh, is your friend coming?
Is your friend coming along?
That's just what that
probably does.
Oh, but that was great.
I always have a hard time, what, how should you refer to it? And, because,
it just struck me as funny. That's all.
Anyway, the Sonia Citron interview comes your way tomorrow. So,
I've got kids that are dating, and then I've got, in-laws that talk to them, and that's how they refer. You know what I mean? Like, oh, is your friend coming over too?
Chris says he'll be good for Jesse. I don't know. I don't see anyone convincing Jesse to do a solo show tomorrow. I just don't see that. Do you?
No. Solo shows are intimidating. I will say that. Solo shows are intimidating. So
I think the ones I've done like here have been we in, we out. I've done like a solo we in, we out. And I've also done they tend to be Thursdays for whatever reason.
Okay.
But I've also done, like where I've had some sound bites of like Marcus Freeman or something like that, and just kind of go through and do that kind of thing. So those are a little bit easier when you have some natural content, I think. Speaking of natural content, this mailbag box is full of questions.
Oh, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I haven't even looked at any of them. I see that we have a good number of them starred.
I want you to scroll in there. You go in there real
Oh,
quick.
boy.
I want you to just plunk the first question up. I want
Okay.
you to pick the first one.
My goodness.
DK, who was teasing Jesse with his address last week, says that he'll do it with him. You can just plop on over to Jesse's place and do the show with him.
How about this one?
Okay.
From Andre. He says, pick 2 schools you would prefer to home and home series. He says for him, South Carolina and Ole Miss, Oregon, Penn State, Arizona, and Utah, just a few teams I was thinking of.
Do you have any in mind
that I would like to see them do a home and home with?
Yeah.
I would like to see Tennessee again. I would like to see that. I think that they are officially kind of a national powerhouse team. I would like to see them as a home and home. I think that one would be a lot of fun. Alabama's already on the schedule coming up. Georgia's been on the schedule, I feel like, a lot. Ohio State's been on the schedule a bunch. I'm not going to say Michigan because if they never play them again, I'm fine with that. So they are not one of mine. Trying to think of another one that would like Oregon would be interesting. I wouldn't mind seeing Notre Dame go out to Oregon. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That was the first one that jumped to mind for me. Probably Oregon.
Yeah, I like that.
Because I was trying to think of some other, like, I think Get Out West would be, kind of optimal. The Pacific Northwest has never been like a huge recruiting hotbed or anything like that. But at the same time, I feel like it would be, I don't know if maybe you'd want that as a Shamrock Series game, like maybe you go to Vegas or like even maybe you play in Seattle, play Oregon in Seattle.
I could see that.
Where the Seahawks plays at Lumen. I can never remember, like the names of the stadiums change so much. I can't keep them straight. But
12th man. That's all you got to remember for that one. I mean, it's been so many different things.
I do want Michigan. That's coming up. So, I'm content with that. I would take my Jayhawks as well. It's been a long time. It's been like 25 plus years, I think, since Notre Dame and Kansas played. And I think that you could do like Kansas comes to Notre Dame Stadium and then the return trip, because they would sell so many tickets. They're building a new home stadium, but it's not going to be really big. I think that's like you could play it at Arrowhead. Like I think we've had some people talk about, what about Notre Dame at Arrowhead Stadium there in Kansas City? I think that would be
okay.
Cool. So
a lot of people want Notre Dame to play in Kansas City. I've seen that a bunch, and I could see that. And Kansas would obviously make sense for that game. I think Kansas has played at Arrowhead a few different times, if I'm not mistaken.
They played part of their schedule because they ripped down their old stadium this past season.
Gotcha.
And so they played, there's like a soccer stadium in Kansas City and then Arrowhead, obviously. And they played mostly at the soccer stadium, but they played at least a couple games at Arrowhead. DK says not sure Kansas would do much. And I get it, but again, I'm just thinking because of, one, the program is at least better the last few years with Leopold, and two, like the opportunity to, maybe get to play in another NFL stadium because Notre Dame's never played at Arrowhead before.
And I hate to break the news to DK. The question was addressed to Sean and myself. Opinion.
That's true.
Sean,
so it really doesn't matter.
Right. You're entitled to your opinion, my friend, and you want Kansas, and I'm cool with that. Somebody put Hawaii. Yeah, that'd be great, but I have a feeling the powers that be at Irish Breakdown aren't paying for us to go to Hawaii to cover that game. So that's off the list for me. Texas would be one that I would be on board with. I wouldn't mind a home and away with Texas. I think that's
coming. That's scheduled already in the near future. So that's not too far away. Yeah. And Decaf, I don't know if Decaf was saying Indiana earlier, but somebody was saying Indiana. Again, that one is on the horizon within the next 5 or 6 years, but he's saying specifically at Lucas Oil. And I feel like Notre Dame's not going to want to give up their home game, and Indiana wouldn't want to give that up as well. It'd be a sellout on both ends.
Why do you want IU so bad? Give me a reason. Because because they had one good year,
we just saw it
playing a pansy schedule. Like, let's have them prove it for a little while that they're actually going to be any good. Like, I do not like, how annoying it was leading up to the IU game with IU fans thinking IU was actually good. I will pass on IU. That's a hard pass for me.
So Salty wants us to answer for Brian. Brian says the defense will have a different look this season. What did he mean by that?
I have no idea.
I have no clue. You'd have
they got a new defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Obviously. So, and there's going to be some new personnel at some key positions. They got some big time guys to replace. So it's going to look different in that regard. From a scheme standpoint, I don't think the average person is going to be able to tell the difference watching Notre Dame play defense. It's still going to be the same philosophy. It's still going to be the same shell. It's still going to be very similar. There might be some different play calling. There might not be as active blitzing, things like that. So that'll look different. But outside of personnel and some play calling, I don't think it's going to be that different.
Yeah, it's interesting because we got to talk to some defensive players after practice today, and Al Washington, like I said, and we'll hear from Al Washington in rapid fire. But Logan Thomas specifically, I was talking about him and kind of like what his spring priorities is. And he said, he started off by saying learning, the new defense. And I'm like, okay, you're saying new defense. We had been told that Chris Ash is going to run Al Golden's defense, that it's Notre Dame's defense. So what exactly is new? And then he basically just said, well, it's not really new from a schematic standpoint. It's just the verbiage, like they're calling things differently. So they've basically just changed the verbiage and stuff like that. But for the most part, he said it really is going to be the same. Now, the one little tweak that Al Washington, because I think Bryce Young brought it up, and I haven't had I didn't get to specifically hear what Bryce Young said, I think, but some other guys said that he and somebody else said something to the effect of, like, the defensive ends, I think on the boundary side, might line up a little wider, basically, in an attempt to, try to, like utilize them, a little bit differently. But other than that, again, it doesn't sound like there are going to be that many differences. So I'd be curious to see why Brian thinks that it will.
Yeah, I haven't heard Brian talk about that. He and I have not talked about that, specifically. So, hey, look, it's going to be a little different. You got a new D coordinator, right? But they're not going to completely change it on its head. Like that's I don't.
Yeah, I think they're going to be tweaks, and again, like just philosophically, Al Golden, we know Al Golden liked to dial up pressure. Yeah. So, again, while the base of the defense might be the same, a big difference could be, you might not have a coordinator who wants to dial it up the way Al Golden
did. Because that's all personal preference. You know what I mean? Like play calling is unique to everybody. You could give somebody the exact same defense with the exact same call sheet, and it's going to look different no matter who you give it to. So, like, yes, you will see differences in that regard. I haven't seen enough, obviously, of practice in the spring to think anything different. And it's a brand new guy. So you're not going to get a feel for what he does from a play calling standpoint until August 31st. I don't think anybody can, and I'm not saying that Brian's wrong or anything like that. I just don't think you can say how different it's going to look now. I think you got to wait until we actually see some games being played.
I concur. Or at least a real, scrimmage situation where we're not seeing, position group stuff and, all that kind of thing, which is predominantly what we've got to see so far.
Right.
Like we haven't seen anything that resembles a team period out there.
No substance whatsoever. And like I said, we're not supposed to say dates and stuff, but the next time we see practice will be the first time that we see anything of any substance. And again,
and even then, we don't know exactly to what extent it'll be.
I was just going to say, I'm not even convinced how much substance we're actually going to be able to see at that point. So everybody's guess is as good as anybody else's guess at this point. Whoever you listen to religiously, like, we'll see what that looks like. You know what I mean? Like, we'll see what happens.
Pertinent question here. Salty wants to know if DK has angelic derangement syndrome.
Ooh.
I guess we'll let DK answer that one. But
yeah, I don't really have an answer to that one.
Yeah. To a much more pertinent quarterback question.
Okay.
Well, Kenny Minchie shown at the first practice. Right. Salty says. CJ Carr shown at today's practice. With the quarterback, will the quarterbacks take turns being the best at each practice?
Sure. Like, it just depends, man. Like, I don't know. No, do I think it's going to be equal, that every guy is going to have an equal number of good practices versus the other guys? No, I don't think that's going to be the case. Do I think we get to see 3? So one you got one you got the other. I guess we'll see what happens in the third. I don't think they're going to take turns, no.
And look, I know you probably read Brian's practice report, and that's what you're basing it on, or you listened to Brian's show earlier today because they talked about practice. Look, we saw less in this practice than we saw in the last practice. Like, they took the offense, like, we got to talk to the offensive and defensive line players today. Well, they took both of those units outside, so we got to actually see less of them before, they brought them in so we could do our interviews afterwards. And then, again, like, it's all relative. Did CJ Carr look a little bit better throwing the ball? Was he more consistent? Did it look good? Did he look sharp? All those things. Yes. But we really only saw one practice or one period, the very last period, where they were doing anything that, resembled anything of substance. They were literally mostly warming up for the first 3 periods. And I think, like, the first period, they just kind of were like out there, like tossing it a little bit. And then period 4, the last period that we got to see, they had the 4 quarterbacks out there and they started throwing to receivers and tight ends and stuff like that. So again, like, yeah, he looked sharp. It's like, okay, the spiral is a little bit tight, tighter. The ball is a little bit more on time, all those kind of things. But it was one-on-one receivers against air. So, like Brian is right. Yeah, Carr looked better, but it's relative as to what we actually got to see and what we would compare it to, from a week ago, to say that he looks better. So again, like, reading anything into that in terms of who's going to win the starting quarterback job, I'm sorry. No.
Not ready to make that declaration yet.
I am out on that. I am out on that.
So I listened to everything that you had to say, and what I heard was Steve Angeli is going to be the starter. That's what I got out of that.
I think a lot of people heard that. I mean, just go to the Champions Lounge.
Oh, yeah. Believe me. I've been in there.
Well, and again, like, Jesse and I were playing the Gino Gaduli cuts yesterday, and people were because it's like, oh, listen to all these great things he's saying about him. And it's like, look, he's their position coach. Do you think that he's going to sit in front of the media and just pick each of these guys apart? He's going to tell you what is the best about them,
Correct. Which is his job, by the way.
Right.
Just FYI.
Our job is to pick them apart when we get the opportunities to. His job is to make them better and to build them up as much as possible.
Also correct. Yes. And yeah, if you were expecting him to be like, well, this guy sucks and I don't even know why he's got a scholarship. And then, this guy's just doing a bang up job. And he's going to give you a word salad every single time. And that's his job. That's what he's going to do. And if you expect otherwise, then you're just kind of fooling yourself. They will not say anything definitive, they meaning the coaching staff, until probably 2 weeks into fall. And the only definitive thing that you're going to get is if a kid decides to transfer. Like, that's going to be the most definitive statement that you're going to get if one of the 3 guys or 2 guys, or whatever the case may be, if they decide to transfer. If all 3 guys stick around, you're literally going to be holding on to a nothing burger because they're not going to tell you squat. That's where
I'm shaking my head.
That's where I'm
shaking my head.
I
don't know if I don't know if you're going to have an opinion on this, Vince. The best Elvis song.
I'm a big fan of Jailhouse Rock.
Okay.
If you think about it, it's obviously not a very practical song. If you actually listen to the words, like that's not something that would ever happen. But I do like the song. You can't go wrong with a hound dog. You can't go wrong with blue suede shoes. I'm not a big fan of like Blue Christmas. Like that really doesn't do it for me. But definitely early Elvis for me as opposed to late Elvis. So
see, I'm more late Elvis than early Elvis because like he tried to sort of find himself. Because basically time passed him by. Like from like the originals. Once the 70s came about. So he kind of tried to pop it up and all that kind of stuff. So I'm more Promised Land and Little Less Conversation would be.
A little less conversation,
little more action.
Yeah, man.
All this aggravation and satisfaction in me.
It's good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah. I was Michael, a little more traditional. Amazing Grace.
Oh, okay,
a lot of people like his Little Sister. I like the Dwight Yoakam version of Little Sister, Mr. Bourbon.
I actually like some of Elvis's movies, to be honest with you. Like,
I don't think I've actually seen an Elvis movie. I saw the Elvis movie a couple years ago when it came out. Did you go see that?
The one with Tom Hanks?
Yeah.
Yes.
Colonel Parker.
I thought it was good. There was definitely some stuff I didn't know. Like, well, I guess I'm taking the movie as gospel. I assume that was true for the most part, right? It was interesting. I thought it was very, very interesting. Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I haven't seen an Elvis movie in a really long time.
Yeah, I don't think I've actually, like I said, I don't think I've actually seen a movie that Elvis starred in. I don't think I've ever seen any of those.
Oh, I'm sure I have. Let's see. Yeah. Well, he was actually in a lot of different movies. GI Blues is actually a decent one. He was in like
Beach Blanket Bingo. I think was that one of them. Like, does that sound familiar?
That's a great question.
TK says Forrest Gump.
Oh yeah, Viva Las Vegas. Great.
Viva Las Vegas.
That's a really good one. He's a race car driver in that one. That's a good one. I'm a big fan of that one.
Did you ever see the Vegas movie that Sarah Jessica Parker and Nick Cage were in with James Caan? Not Leaving Las Vegas. No. It was it's funny because Nick Cage did Leaving Las Vegas, obviously, but he also did like a rom-com.
Oh.
It was kind of a take on the Demi Moore, Robert Redford movie, Indecent Proposal.
Oh, really?
It was sort of a rom-comified version of that, where Nick Cage, Sarah Jessica Parker go to Vegas, and James Caan, wants, like to buy like a weekend or something or a day with Sarah Jessica Parker, something like that. But it didn't go nearly as dark as Indecent. Was it Indecent Proposal? Yeah, I think it was Indecent Proposal.
That one was. Did you know that he did 31 movies? I just looked it up.
Elvis did 31 movies.
Yes.
Man.
Now, back in the day, I mean, they were pumping out movies.
Right.
Like they would do multiple a year. Like, it's not like it is now where it takes them a year to do it, and then they edit it for a year. And,
and they'd also sign them to these contracts where it's like, now you've got to do 15 movies for us, and probably got paid for the work of 2.
Correct.
So
correct, 100%. But yeah, he did 31 movies. Man. And I want to see. So the first one was in 1956. The last one was 1969. So he did 31 movies in 13 years. So
wow.
Yeah. So that tells you how quickly they were pumping those out. So
Honeymoon in Vegas. Okay. Is what it was called. Nick Cage, James Caan, Sarah Jessica Parker. Honeymoon in Vegas. I recommend it.
Noted.
So Mark wants to know, how do you think NIL and the portal will affect college football program dominance periods? In other words, how long can a certain program stay dominant?
Well, if they keep pumping out the money, They can stay dominant for a while. The days of like the dynasties might be over, but I think you're going to see. I think you're going to see the top teams stay the top teams, with like little interjections of other teams that maybe like just go all in one year and try to be really, you know what I mean? But like, I still think the dominant teams are still going to be the dominant teams. Does that make sense? Like,
I think the teams that continue to recruit the best and get the best
sure.
high school kids
Agreed.
are going to stay up there. But just like what we saw this year, between the expanded playoff, the transfer portal, and NIL, the talent is spreading around. Like, I think you're right. Like in general, I think, Georgia's going to stay up
Right.
there for the most part. Like Clemson, that is a question to answer. I mean, they obviously really were fortunate to be back in the playoff because of the fact that, there's an expanded format this year. Texas, the last couple of years, I think Notre Dame is going to stay in that conversation. But I think that like the Arizona States of the world, the Boise's of, like that's where sort of the revolving is going to be. But I think in general, as long as you have a guy like Kirby Smart at Georgia, and, regardless of what you think of James Franklin and Ryan Day, those programs are going to stay relevant. So is Notre Dame. TD4ND says LSU question marks. I mean, that's to be seen. I think that this is a really big year for Mr. BK down there at LSU, because it's 3 years. They haven't sniffed the playoffs yet, even with an expanded format and all these extra teams getting in. They weren't even in the conversation to get a playoff spot, so like,
right.
They, especially for all the talk about going down there and that athletic department and everybody being invested and all that, you've heard what you've typically heard from him the previous dozen years, and that's nothing but excuses as to why he's having a hard time getting it done. So
I completely
this is what
agree.
it is.
This is a big year for him down there. This is year 4, if I'm not mistaken, right? It's the same as Marcus Freeman, right? So this is year 4, and he needs to make the playoff at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't make the playoff, they may be looking to make a change down there, because look, we've seen LSU, and this is not bashing Brian Kelly. This is not like anybody that is the coach at LSU, with the benefits that they have down there, the advantages that you perceived or otherwise. If they don't make the playoff 4 years in a row, they're going to be looking to make a change, especially in an expanded playoff. He needs to be in the playoff, man. And like I said, I think he'll be on a very, very, very hot seat when this season is over if LSU is not in the playoff. So
I think so too.
National championship coaches down.
No, I honestly think they have to be in the playoff this year. Otherwise, the seat is, like the only benefit that he has is the fact that the length of the contract is so long. But you get enough boosters who aren't satisfied, and they'll buy him out and run him out of town. But I think it's year 4. They've got to be in the playoff this year.
Completely agree.
Mike says the Nick Cage movie, Las Vegas movie, was Leaving Las Vegas. Yes, he did both Leaving Las Vegas and a rom-com called Honeymoon in Vegas. He did both. And then he also landed a plane on the strip in Con Air, if you remember right. So actually he's been to Vegas at least
Con
3
Air.
times. Yeah.
Of all of those movies, Con Air might be the best one. Just saying.
Con Air is really good. I think I saw Leaving Las Vegas once. I mean, that's not a feel-good movie by any stretch. Honeymoon in Vegas, that was like an early to mid-90s.
Yeah.
Like I said, little rom-com. It was, not great, but it was good enough. It was entertaining, I thought. And that was in like Nicolas Cage's sort of heyday. I think that was his peak, his prime back then.
Did you ever see Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Have you ever watched that show?
I've seen it a few times. I never it never really stuck for me.
Okay.
But
I thought that show's hilarious. Andy Samberg is freaking hilarious. And I don't know why he's so funny to me, but he is. And then the captain, Andre Braugher.
Yeah.
He plays the straight man so well. But anyway, long story short, there's an episode where he's stuck in a house with a guy, and all they have are the complete collection of Nicolas Cage movies. It's just really funny. They start quoting the movies and everything. So yeah, it's so ridiculous, but that just reminded me of that. It's just really funny. Face Off.
Joe says Face Off as well, and I'm trying to remember.
Face Off's a good movie. Him and John Travolta.
Wasn't there another movie called like 1,000 Miles to? Let me see if I can find this here.
A Nick Cage movie?
I'm trying to remember if he was in this or not, or was it 500 Miles? There were like it had Kurt Russell, and they were like robbers, thieves, and they were like 3,000 Miles to Graceland.
Yep, I just found it.
Is Nicolas Cage in that?
Kevin Costner's in it.
Kirk Russell, Kevin Costner. Okay, so it wasn't Nicolas Cage.
Courtney Cox, Christian Slater.
Easily could have been. Yeah, Christian Slater easily could have been. I think a Nicolas Cage, 3,000 Miles to Graceland. But there's a lot. I think. Well, I know that Nicolas Cage was like a big Elvis guy, and so like there was a big Elvis tie-in with that honeymoon in Vegas that I was talking about. But all right,
wasn't it a bunch of Elvises like jumped out of a plane?
Yeah, the Flying Elvises, Utah chapter.
Every once in a while, I'll surprise you. We have gotten way off, and it's fantastic.
I know. I don't know how this happened. It's all Salty's fault. He got us with the
Ask
Elvis
some more
songs.
crazy. I like the crazy questions on Mailbag Night. That's where we can only answer our questions about the team quarterback position so many times.
Very true. Mike wants to know Olivia Miles' ankle injury performance more impressive than Kurt Schilling's.
Well, Kurt Schilling was in the World Series, if I'm not mistaken. No, that was the American
ALCS. It was the final. It was Game 7 of the ALCS, completing the comeback from down 4-0.
Little bit of a bigger moment.
And the sock was bloody.
Yes.
His teammates all corroborate that it was real. It was not ketchup. So
but look, it doesn't take anything away from what Olivia Miles did. She twisted her ankle pretty solid. I mean, when you watch it on replay, it went all the way. And so that hurts, man. So I'm glad that she was able to get out there and do it, but that was not quite the stage of the ALCS.
Yeah, and it's got to be Schilling because again, they literally had to perform like a little procedure, and they surgically repaired this tendon.
True.
To keep it in place so that he could go out there and do that. But I like the thing that you've got to give to Olivia Miles is like with Schilling, it's like essentially one motion over and over and over again. Whereas playing basketball and you're cutting on that ankle, it is pretty impressive what she was able to do on that thing. Because I don't think I saw her limp all day on that thing. And
you couldn't, outside of the fact that she had an obvious brace on her ankle.
Yeah.
I don't think that you couldn't tell me that it was obvious that she had an ankle injury. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. I agree with that completely.
Andre wants to know, do you believe the biggest obstacle in wide receiver recruiting is having a passing quarterback, or do you believe this is a false narrative?
Oh, I think that's 100%. Well, maybe not 100%. That's a big part of it. It's a big part of it. They didn't throw the ball around last year, right? We all thought that Notre Dame had good receivers, last year. They made some plays at times. But at the end of the day, Riley Leonard's not a guy that's going to sit in the pocket and pick you apart, okay? I think all three of the quarterbacks that are in the room now have that ability more so than Riley Leonard. And so I absolutely think if you start a dynamic passing quarterback, the wide receivers will come. I absolutely believe that.
Yeah, you got to show that you can be a 21st century offense, essentially. That's still what they're trying to get to. And that's also why this decision on this quarterback is so important, and it's literally going to take them into the next century finally, if it goes in the direct. Now, as we've said before, this isn't the thing where you have 4 or 5 good passing games and all of a sudden the receivers are going to start flocking to South Bend. It's like you've got to keep this going, but you do have to show them that wide receivers are going to be a part of this. And part of it as well, which I know gets used against them on the recruiting trail, is where Notre Dame wide receivers get drafted. Like we can talk about USC and Ohio State, but again, they crank out high first-round draft picks,
NFL level wide receivers.
Yeah,
I mean that's why this is a long game. Like we talked about this the other day, with recruiting, right? And recruiting at Notre Dame, like people were expecting there to be an instant, change in recruiting when Notre Dame went to the national championship game. It's the long game. You got to play the long game with recruiting. Like guys that are looking to sign and commit and all that, like in the 26 class, going to the national championship game is not going to make that much of a difference. Like there wasn't a bunch of guys just sitting back and thinking to themselves, okay, I'm going to go to whatever school makes it to the national championship game. Mm-hmm. And if they don't, I'm not going there. Like that's just not the thought process for these guys. So you need to show consistency in getting to the playoff on a regular basis. You got to show consistency of putting up numbers. You got to show consistency all the way around. And then the guys are going to start to come. Like the national championship will affect the 27 class and the 28 class, not the 26 class. So you got to give it a little bit of time. And the 27s are going to be watching to see whoever the quarterback is at Notre Dame and what they do with the wide receivers, right? And so continuity from a coaching staff standpoint, whoever gets the starting quarterback job this year will most likely be a multi-year starter. That's important. When was the last time Notre Dame had a quarterback play 2 years in a row? Ian Book.
True.
The consistency at the quarterback position is going to be key too. So long story short, Andre, I do believe this is a true narrative that a passing quarterback will absolutely positively affect wide receiver recruiting.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Patrick Duffy, thanks for the super chat. I didn't realize we had a celebrity watching the
seriously.
show. Patrick Duffy.
Step by step.
He says, nothing can ever match Kirk Gibson's walk-off World Series game-winning pinch hit home run when he couldn't walk. It's hard to disagree with. The guy was sitting down in the clubhouse and started swinging it, and he could barely swing it and could barely walk, and he looked like he was going to fall over 8 different times when he was standing in the batter's box before he finally cranked that out of there. The exact same day, later that night, Notre Dame beat Miami in 1988. Yep. Kirk Gibson's walk-off home run.
That was a hell of a day. I really wish that kind of a day existed that I could remember.
Seriously.
You know what I mean? Like that would have been a hell of a day to watch. Like that would have been awesome. That'd have been awesome.
I think I might have said this before. Like I watched both of those things live on the same day.
That's crazy.
But I had no recollection until a few years ago that they actually happened on the same day. Like that never registered to me.
Well, see,
just kind of.
That's never going to happen again because you're never going to see a World Series game that's in the afternoon.
That's true.
And the primetime games for football are always going to be in the evening.
Yeah, Notre Dame, Miami would play at night.
They're going to be against each other, so you'll never be able to watch both of those at the same time again. Well, I mean, you could, like if you had 2 TV, you know what I mean? Like it won't be a back-to-back scenario.
No. Salty wants to know if Stanford's general manager, Andrew Luck's firing of Troy Taylor, the football coach, in the absence of an athletic director, is it the biggest power move seen from the evolving GM position?
Yeah, because the GM position at the college level, everywhere else is underneath the coach.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was going to say it's different at every school. This one probably has the most authority of any of them, where it's actually the GM is above the head coach.
And I wonder if the coach was a little surprised that the GM was above him when he walked into his office and said, "You're fired." Um, maybe it was understood that Andrew Luck was like running the show, like top down. But that was news to me that a collegiate GM had that kind of power. Like that is a power.
Me
move
too.
right there.
Me too. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it kind of makes you wonder, like, does Andrew Luck just make himself the head coach? Like, what do you do in that situation
Right.
now? Like, do
Right.
you, because you are in the middle of spring, like you can't install a new system before training camp begins?
The
Like,
timing is really odd.
well, I mean, we were talking about the timing yesterday. Like, all this stuff has just been coming out, and it obviously led to this. But like, I don't. If you think that what he did was serious enough to fire him, you absolutely had to make the move now, right?
Yeah.
But the question is, do you just retain the rest of the staff, elevate somebody, kind of make them, either the interim or promote them to head coach and go on, or do you go out and try to find a whole new staff now at this point?
I don't know how you do go out and find a whole new staff right
Yeah.
now because staffs are in place. Like I don't know. Like I said, it's very curious timing because of where you're at right now. Like every school in the country is in the middle of spring practice. Every single one.
Yeah.
Maybe beginning, maybe middle, maybe end, but everybody's in it
You're
right
at
now.
some point in spring practice. Yeah.
Like guys aren't going to leave for the most part unless it's like a position coach leaves to be the head coach or something like that, but you're leaving your current school in a lurch too. And guys, coaching's a very small fraternity. You don't want to go pissing people off, by leaving at this point in the season and leaving those guys in a lurch because guys remember that kind of thing. You know what I mean? I don't like it. I don't like the timing of it. If Andrew, if you are that upset with this guy, I think you got to ride with the current staff and name an interim and call it a day. I
kind of think so too.
I don't think you can just blow it up like this. Or like, what did he do that was so egregious that you can't give him one more year? You know what I mean?
Well, they basically said that he was a bully to, females on the staff.
Okay, so I didn't know that. Okay, so that makes sense. So you're going to get rid of him. You're going to name an interim, and you're going to keep moving forward. Like that's what you got to do. And then you take one of your analysts and you fill the extra coaching position. You know what I mean? Like that's what you do. Okay, I didn't realize that extra part of that. So okay,
yeah.
So he was fired with cause. Okay, got it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like Corey says, aggressive to other staff members. Yeah, and there was like originally Taylor had come out and sort of like did the mea culpa and said I'm going to learn from this or whatever, and then about a week later, the axe fell, the hammer fell right on top of him.
The last thing Stanford needs is another reset because they were already bad. But
yeah, like DJ says, the administration obviously knows way more than any of us know about what happened.
Oh.
So if they thought that it was warranted, then
I don't disagree with that at all. I didn't realize there were extenuating circumstances. I thought it was just a performance-based decision.
No, it wasn't a performance-based thing.
Shows you how much,
even though the performance also wasn't there. But it's essentially like you can't be a bad coach and a jerk to everybody.
Agreed.
And apparently he was both. So
yeah, no, I agree with that.
Andre wants to know which women's basketball player needs to make the biggest impact outside the Big Four. He says bench players, pick any of them. And I mean, the bench essentially comes down to like Liza Carlin and Kate Koval. And against this specific opponent, I think that both of them are going to be big factors because of the fact that you have Sedona Prince, who we talked about, who's 6'7" and went 20 points, 20 rebounds, and 8 block shots in the first meeting between these two teams.
Who are the Big Four?
Well, I assume by Big Four, like it obviously starts with Hannah Hidalgo, Olivia Miles, Sonia Citron. I guess that is the question. Is it Westbeld or King? Like who in your definition is the Big Four?
Whoever that fourth one is, it's the other one.
Yeah, that's probably true.
That's where I'm at. You know what I mean? Now, your answer was awesome because I completely agree with you going up against a 6'7" opponent and all of those things. But they need that fifth starter. Whoever, whichever one you decide isn't part of the Big Four. I want to see a breakout game from one of those two.
Yeah. And now Decaf is saying Prosper. I think Prosper's impact on this game is going to be more about how they use her against Haley Van Lith defensively than anything she does offensively.
That's fair.
In this game. She played in the first game, and that's not like negating anything, but I just feel like it's basically a two-player game that you've got to defend, and it's Haley Van Lith starting with the player with the hand or with the ball in her hand, and then the big post player, Sedona Prince. So, and again, I think that they're going to mix things up on Van Lith, and I went back and I watched that fourth quarter last night on YouTube, and it's basically everything that I remembered. Like offensively, Notre Dame just stopped moving the ball. There were some drives to the basket where they missed a couple of, pretty easy layups. That was an impact, but also it'd be like one pass, take a shot, miss, and then it's back the other way. And then here comes Van Lith with the drive, either drive to the basket, drive and kick to somebody else, and they hit a couple three-pointers. And, so a lot of it is going to come down to some of the things, that came back on Notre Dame in that late season stretch, specific to the Van Lith part of it, the drive part of it, who's going to help step up and keep her outside the paint and keep her from being an impact getting to the rack. That's going to be huge, I think.
Yep.
So
they got to lock her down and they got to get inside her head like they've done a very good job of doing in other meetings with her in the past. Get inside her head, make her make some boneheaded, heat of the moment decisions. I think that's also big.
Yeah. But again, I feel like that Westbeld Carlin, more specific to, it's for them, it's about what they can provide defensively to help out in the paint against Prince because of that size that she has. Because Koval is the only one who obviously comes close with the size when you're talking about a 6'7" player in Prince, but she can't do it alone. She's going to need some help.
Yep. Going to see some help side there. I agree.
All right.
Patrick Duffy, I like his response too. Drive on her and get her in foul trouble. Look, one thing that you can watching Marcus Burton when he was in high school in the semi-state game, he went up against a kid from Kokomo who's now at Kansas.
Number 40. I can't think of his name. Big guy from overseas and all this. Marcus Burton just took it right to his chest like every time and had a lot of success doing that. Got him in foul trouble and all those different things. Now, that kid had his moments, don't get me wrong, but Marcus Burton wasn't afraid to just get into this kid's chest and just get after it. And Flory Badunga.
There you go, Flory. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
I think that's a great strategy. You've got multiple guards that have the ability to drive to the basket and make some things happen. Just take it right to her. It's like in football, you got a really good defensive lineman. We're going to run right at you, So I do think that's not the only way to get after her, but I think that's a good way as well.
Yeah. But I mean, the drive and kick type stuff is there for Notre Dame as well.
Absolutely.
Yep. And really the whole thing for me, obviously defense is going to be a big part of it, but the whole thing for me, when Notre Dame has to be in the half court set, if they keep moving the ball like we saw in different spurts against Michigan and definitely against Stephen F. Austin as well, they can be successful against anybody. So the ball can't become stagnant. It can't become an ISO game where it's one player, one-on-one, just, trying to win and get to the rim. So Mark says, I know it's an up year for SEC men's basketball, but is 14 of 16 league teams making the tournament too many?
Yes. Yes.
I think they've got 7 in the Sweet 16 though, don't they? I mean,
is that what it is? Is that what the number is?
I think if I'm not mistaken, I think that's what it came down to.
That also means 7 of them lost. You know what I mean? Like, you probably cap it at 10 and you probably still would have been okay. You know what I mean? I just think 14 is a big number. That's all. That's a little some of those bottom feeder teams that got in, I think probably didn't deserve to get in. But I mean, hey, they did.
Arkansas was a number 10 seed, and they're one of those teams in the Sweet 16 now. So
cut it off at 10.
But they're a 10 seed. That doesn't mean they're the 10th team. They might have been the 14th team in the SEC. I mean, you're either deserving or you're not. And it was a really good conference. And I don't know. It's a really weird time in college basketball because there was already an issue with one and done stuff, and that's going to continue to be an issue. But again, like with transfer portal and NIL, talent is so spread out. And I think that there was just a general, like from the other conferences, in terms of depth, I think there was just a general lack of teams that really deserve to be there, other than North Carolina, of course, which, look at North Carolina, where they are. Or where they were, before they ended up getting out. I didn't realize, though, until this last weekend. Do you remember Mateen Cleaves?
Yes.
The Michigan State point guard?
Yes.
Did you know that his son is playing for the Spartans now?
Shut up.
That's how old you are.
God. No, I didn't realize that, but thank you for pointing it out, Sean.
I know.
Yes, I remember Mateen Cleaves.
The Flintstones, man. The Flintstones.
Winning a national championship for Michigan State. Yep. I remember that very well.
Last national championship.
Yeah. Wow. I am old.
What role do you see Kedron Young playing this season?
Short yardage. He's not going to unseat the top two guys. But I think there might be more opportunities to get on the field, maybe in short yardage, like that kind of a thing. I mean, he's a 237 pound, I think, or something ridiculous. 2-3 and then a number. It doesn't matter really what that number is. Who moves so well, but he is put together, man. And he's not the guy I want to see in short yardage if I'm the defense. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean
his role expands next year,
and that's his best bet. But again, like with this new running backs coach, I don't know. Right. I don't know that we're going to see the amount of roles for all these guys like Dylan McCullough had. And that's going to be that will be kind of a question, because Jawan Sider's kind of been asked that question a couple of times, and he's really hasn't said anything more than that's he wants to play to the talent in the room, but I don't know that he wants to necessarily go deep into the room. And they obviously have two guys who can both be number one, and Aeneas Williams is a budding guy who has talent right behind him. And I just don't know what the rest of that is going to look like in terms of like specific to the offense, other than special teams, what that's going to look like for the rest of those guys. But for Kedron Young, that short yardage, like you're talking about, would definitely be his best opportunity.
I think that's the easiest way to get him on the field, to get him some reps and some things like that. And then, like I said, there's a great chance that the top two guys are gone at the end of the year, right? To the NFL draft and all that. Well, all of a sudden that just opens things up tremendously for a guy like Kedron Young and Aeneas Williams, all the guys that are in that room. So I would very much try to get him on the field on a semi-regular basis. In every game, that kind of a thing, to get him some well-needed reps before next year.
I would agree with this, what DJ says. They need to do a better job of giving fourth quarter carries to the 4 and 5 deep backs, especially when the game is out of hand. And again, like with a new running back coach.
Yeah, we don't know what that looks
like. It's basically on him, how he decides to handle that kind of stuff. But I would generally agree with that. What's the single most impactful adjustment Denbrock can make to the offense this season?
With who he starts at quarterback. Like, that's the biggest impactful adjustment, because it's going to change the way the offense operates. No matter which one of the three guys that you've got in there, the offense is going to operate differently than it did last year. And so that's why it's going to be most impactful, whether that's positive or negative. It's still going to be the most impactful. So depending on which guy he picks, that's going to be the most impactful to the offense.
Hard to argue with that. I mean, that's literally the most impactful thing that decision that he can make is who's going to be the quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And like I said, depending on who you have, it's going to depend on what the offense looks like. So I can't wait. I'm excited.
DJ says moving Love around. Interesting that we've talked about Jeremiah Love the last couple of days. We talked about him. You and I talked about him being on the field more on third downs. Jesse and I played a clip from him yesterday where he was talking about the fact that he played so much wide receiver last spring. And then we get out there today and literally the running backs were in one group, but not number 4. He was over with the wide receivers doing wide receiver drills throughout the morning today. So that's
remember I said
part of the plan.
I said Aeneas Williams was a better receiver than Jeremiah Love. Maybe Jeremiah Love took that personally. And now he's out there working with the receivers.
I took that personally. I literally, I don't think you could go between Price, Love, and Aeneas Williams. If you're going to do more 21 personnel, I think any two of those three, you can do a lot of different ththings with.
Agreed. Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. But that's something else that J1 Sider talked about kind of, when he was asked about how, you use some of these different guys as well. We haven't figured out exactly, are we a 21 heavy team? Are we a 12 heavy team? Are we an 11 heavy team? They were obviously more, 11 than 12 in what we were used to. We've all wanted to see more 21. And it just seems like with the kind of talent that they've got stacked up in that running back room, that even if they're not a 21 heavy team, at least more 21 this year would make a lot of sense because of what they've got in that room and how they can use them in some different ways. Okay, Vince, have you seen either Carrie or The Shining? Because Salty wants to know the better Stephen King movie.
Neither.
Carrie is actually on HBO right now. It was and I looked, and it's the old Sissy Spacek from 1976. That movie just always freaked me out.
That's the one where they pour all the blood on her.
Yeah, the pig's blood at the end and all that stuff. Yeah. That just freaked me out, man. So I was out on Carrie. I never liked that movie. The Shining also freaked me out, but in a way, I could still watch The Shining. So I got to go with The Shining.
Okay, fair enough. I'm just not a big fan of scary movies in general.
I'm not either. All the horror movies that they're cranking out, that's one of the. It's like a genre that has remained pretty consistent in terms of people will watch that stuff, and I'm not big on it.
I am not either. I like suspense. I'm down with that, but Misery, for example, I thought that was that movie freaked me out. That was creepy. But yeah, I'm not really a scary movie guy. So
I've never seen The Stand. It's another Stephen King movie. I think after Carrie, they pretty much started making turning all the Stephen King novels.
Pretty much.
If I remember right, he didn't particularly care for the adaptation of The Shining, if I remember right.
Interesting.
But, yeah. Final one from Salty. Is a champion jacket the best in fall football apparel?
The brand? Just a champion?
I've only had one champion jacket. It was the pullover with a little bit of the V-neck. Notre Dame. It was either Notre Dame or Irish across the front. I think I might have the photo around here somewhere on my wall. Because I actually wore it to the very first Notre Dame game that I went to. I don't think it's on. Let me see. No, I used to have it in one of my. I've got a lot of these multi-frame things in here.
Yeah.
Had it for a long time. I don't know where it is now, though.
Yeah, I never had a champion jacket, so I'm going to pass on that. It being the best fall football apparel.
Yeah, I'm going to go with starter jacket. I'm just going to go with starter jacket.
That's pretty clutch right there. Starter jacket right up there. Yep.
People chiming in. Starter, the GOAT. Can't go wrong.
Yep.
We've talked about that before.
You can't go wrong with just a straight up hoodie. That's I'm a hoodie and jeans guy. Like
Yep,
that.
me too.
I'm in my element. So
I got a lot of hoodies. I've got like 5 hoodies hanging up right in front of me on this door. So,
I
and that might be
I
half the hoodies I have.
have a whole shelf of just hoodies. You know what I mean? Just and my wife gets very annoyed every time I come home with a new one. So
Yeah, like mine as well. She's like, "Oh, do you need another?" Like whether it's the hoodie or the pullover. Do you
Hoodie
need
and
another
pullover.
one of those?
Got a pullover right now.
Uh-huh.
I'm a big fan of the khaki pants and a pullover. Like that's what I wear to school a lot. Big fan of the pullovers, folks.
Well, Vince, I've got one thing to ask you at this point. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's go. Rapid fire.
Okay, so as promised, we've got some Joe Rudolph, Charles Jagusah, Al Washington comments that we're going to hear
All right.
now. We're going to start with Joe Rudolph, the offensive line coach.
Okay.
He discussed the reason for Charles Jagusah playing guard this spring. Want to hear it? Here it goes.
I think the same thing. I think you want to try to do your best to get the best 5 guys on the field. I think Charles has great flexibility with what he can do. So that's the biggest reason. I think like if you put the when he was in the game, in the Penn State game, and you watched him, you were like, oh, who's that dude?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think like you don't do that a lot, you know, with the offensive line. There's a lot going on for a guy to stand out that way. So when you see someone maybe could be as good as anyone in the country or better, you kind of keep developing in that spot as well.
Get the best 5 guys on the field. They obviously liked what they saw from him in the Penn State game when he played guard. Vince, what do you think?
I think having him ready to go at either position is obviously the way to go in the spring. Hopefully things start to get a little bit more cemented once you get into the fall. But having him ready at both positions, because look, you can make an argument he's your best guard. You can make an argument he's your best tackle. And he's your best lineman. He's going to be on the field, obviously. But depending on how the other 4 shake down is going to depend on whether he's going to be a guard or a tackle. So I think the spring is a perfect opportunity for him to continue to rep at both.
I think so as well. And I think that the way it sounds, we're probably going to see Jagusah playing more guard this spring than anything else. And now Emil Wagner, for the second practice in a row we've been out there, was not practicing. Last week he was in uniform, but again, it was shells and he wasn't really, but
Yeah.
he's one of the guys who's on, pitch count because
Yep.
he played the most snaps of anybody on the team last year. But I don't know. It's interesting. We're going to hear some comments from Charles Jagusah here in just a minute, but to me, it does. It feels a lot like Joe Rudolph really likes Charles Jagusah at guard. I'm not sure how much Jagusah likes playing guard myself. I'm going to let you hear from Jagusah right now because he was asked today if playing guard this spring is an experiment.
You never know what's going to happen, so we'll see. But for right now, they just told me to try to focus on guard, figure out, see how you do, see how you progress, and then we'll reevaluate it later. So that's what I'm doing right now.
What do you think?
He didn't seem overly enthusiastic, but I don't know him. I don't know him as a person. I don't know if that's just how he sounds when he talks. Like everything is whatever,
And that's what I was kind of trying to, because
yeah.
There were some other questions, like I asked him, like, do you have a preference? And he basically said, I'm going to do what the
Right.
team needs, and,
Yeah,
gave the company
yeah.
line and that kind of stuff. But like the whole line of questioning about playing guard, he didn't necessarily seem that excited about it. But again,
Right.
we haven't talked enough to Charles Jagusah to know if that's, kind of like his typical demeanor, or if it's, is it, does he just have sort of a matter of fact demeanor in general? Because, like the overall sentiment I was getting did not, make me say Charles Jagusah loves playing guard.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's not what I got out of that. That I can tell you. I did not get that Charles Jagusah loves guard. And again, he's a team player. He's going to be okay with whatever they want him to do. Okay, cool. He didn't sound excited, but again, I don't know him that well, so I don't want to put words in his mouth.
Right.
He was dominant as a guard when he was in the game, so as long as he's dominant, I don't care.
That's exactly right. And I mean, obviously, like when you look at the body, like his body and how physically developed he is, especially when you compare them to some of these other guys, like he does feel like a natural fit. And there is obviously a need for a guard at this point.
Right.
And like if you had Billy Schrouth on one side and Charles Jagusah on the other, you know, regardless of who it is, it's pretty intimidating physical couple of guards that you've got.
And I don't agree with this. Like Michael says, because it's clear he should be playing tackle. I don't necessarily agree that it's clear that he should be playing tackle, because you've got some pretty good tackles on the roster too. And when, again, you're trying to get the 5 best on the field, to me, if I'm making that decision right now, Charles Jagusah is starting at guard for me.
If you're trying to get the best 5 on the field.
I'm getting the best 5 on the field.
But I think that Gerby Lambert is probably one of your top 5. Is that right?
Also correct. Yes.
Even though we haven't necessarily seen Lambert that much.
Just from a physical standpoint, you know, and he looked mentally lost last year. You know what I mean? When we were able to watch practice. And so I understand why he didn't play last year. I'm hoping a year makes a difference. But I think from a physical standpoint, he's long, he's athletic, he's strong. Like, he's one of my 5 best. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not making the decision. So
no, but well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play what Joe Rudolph said about Anthony Knapp, because that kind of leads us into
for sure
where he is a piece of this.
I'm curious what he said here. So
the question was, is Knapp a guard or a tackle?
Yeah, he was pretty unique. Like, I think coming in, I thought that maybe he would really factor in more in the internal positions, like center or guard, and then he just was so natural playing out there, and he's got really good length. You know, it's sometimes, you know, the average tackle height's 6'5" in the NFL. It's not 6'8". You know what I mean? That's more of the abnormality. But you know, he just really does some things that helped us and gave us some strength and power and consistency out there, and you know, we thought he played really well. So we'll see. But he does have flexibility as well.
I think we all agree, like, if we're grading on the curve, he played really well because of the situation he was thrust into as a true freshman who was an early enrollee, and because Jagusah did get obviously injured in the first week and no one else really emerged as a real candidate just because of the bodies that they had. Like, so again, if I'm on the curve, you could say he played really well. But if, like, you're grading him against, you know, the 8 million other left tackles in college football, I have a hard time saying Knapp played really well consistently throughout last season. Don't you?
Completely agree with that. And I think that his natural position is inside, whether that's at guard or center. And I think you've got better options, barring health, of course. And that's why he played tackle, was because of a health situation. You've got better options at tackle. He would not be playing tackle for me. He would be my 6th man on the inside. That's where I would have Anthony Knapp.
Yeah, and now we haven't, I mean, obviously Knapp is not even out there right now because of his own injuries. So, like, we haven't seen him do anything. And even what we have seen, you know, in terms of offensive line, it's just been some drill work and stuff like that. We've really just seen where they line up and, you know, where they're lining up for their drills, as opposed to even seeing a full 5-man unit out there. But, you know, to kind of go back, you know, to getting the best 5 guys on the field, I tend to agree that if Gerby Lambert, based on at least, you know, reputation, body type, you know, what we kind of know about him, even though we haven't really got to see it in action, like, I think we would all be much more comfortable if he is one of the top 5, and that includes him playing one of the tackle positions, than like Anthony Knapp. You know, like, I've kind of not fully bought in, like, to the narrative that, you know, like, Joe Rudolph is going to do anything he can to keep Anthony Knapp on the field. But when you listen to that comment, it's almost hard to fight against that now at this point. when you listen to what Joe Rudolph just said.
Against the fact that he's trying to make sure he's on the field?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was very complimentary of him at tackle. And it was almost like he was shooting him an even bigger compliment, saying, well, when he came in, I thought he was going to be interior, but then he showed us he's pretty good out there, and he did some really good things for us out there, and blah, 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 talking about tackle. It's like, hey, man, cross-train him all you want. That's fine. But, like, I just don't think he's your best option at tackle. I just don't.
No. And, just like from a physical development state, like, look at what it took Emil Wagner to get to the point where, like, just physically developed, to get himself on the field. It took him some time. And that's, again, like, if I'm comparing Anthony Knapp to Charles Jagusah, I mean, there's no comparison in terms of physical development. You could probably even say that, like to a guy like Lambert, who's the same age, but is more like, that's the biggest thing that Anthony Knapp needs, is just like physically, from a strength standpoint, based on what we saw last year, he's got to get a lot stronger. He's got to get, thicker in the upper body. And so, like, to hear Joe Rudolph talk about how great he was basically at left tackle last year, I don't think we were watching the same guy.
Well, and look,
I'm not trying to rip Anthony Knapp apart, because, again, I fully appreciate what he did as a true freshman, the team needing him, and but it was kind of a default situation to a large extent that got him out there.
And he was able to pick up the offense, obviously, faster than Gerby Lambert was, and that's why he started over Gerby Lambert.
Exactly.
You can't tell me that Gerby Lambert doesn't have better physical tools than Anthony Knapp. Like that. That's you're fighting a losing battle if that's the fight that you're going to pick, right? So, has the last year allowed Gerby Lambert to catch up from a mental standpoint, and surpass Anthony Knapp? Like, has he figured out, and is at the same level as Anthony Knapp from a mental standpoint, because he is above him at the physical standpoint, right? And so you need to be caught up in the other way, and then it's a no-brainer to me. And again,
and now
I'm not coaching.
The other aspect of this is, like, we get wrapped up in where these guys are right now. And again, like, if we've learned nothing from Joe Rudolph the first couple of years, is curveballs will be thrown once fall training camp starts. Like, we've got 2 training camps of Joe Rudolph under our belt. And when did in either case, did anything go chalk? Like from the time camp opened until like the 5 that ended up out there on the field when it was time to roll it out.
Nope. And
just ask Rocco Spindler, right?
Yeah, exactly. And some of that had to do with injury. And then the response to the injury was what was like, like, I think prior to the injury last year to Charles Jagusah, I think it was like, oh yeah, I think things are probably the way they should be. You know what I mean? And then the injury happened, and it was like, we're just going to throw a bunch of dice in a cup, and we're just going to shake them out and see what happens. Like,
but it seemed like at times.
It's like, dang, man, we're playing Yahtzee over here.
Yeah. So now the other consideration, or the other consideration, I guess, is there consideration being given to moving Emil Wagner from right tackle to left tackle?
It's possible. Yeah, it's possible. There's no doubt. Right now, Gerby's been the one to move to get both sides of it.
Right.
I think, I don't know. It's a good question. So when we get Emil back, it might be something we explore.
So it's a good question, but not really an answer. So it's not something that, again, it sounds like he's very limited if, like doing anything right now, because, they're again, because of, how much he played last year. But it doesn't really sound like that was an option prior to that question for Joe Rudolph.
I think it's an option hypothetically for him. But the way he's looking at it, I think right now is that Emil Wagner's out, so it's not an option. I need a right tackle. Like, I think, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's where he's at, and he's very short-sighted on a lot of things. Wait, did I say that out loud?
Man, that was some heat there. You snuck that little change up in there at the end. Speaking of curveballs,
like, spring is the time to experiment. Throw some guys
And
out.
again, like I go back to Jagusah, and that's why I think that at the very least you're giving him looks there to see what you think while you're working these other guys, because they know at least a year ago they were really confident that Jagusah could play tackle. So I think that that's always a fallback. And the other name that he snuck in there was Gerby Lambert, where they are working him at both tackles.
Yeah.
So he is getting that work. And remember, Anthony Knapp isn't out there right now. So these other guys are getting the looks at both tackle positions while Knapp is out. And as we have seen, there's always that, there's kind of that old school thinking that you shouldn't lose your job to injury. But I think that the way things have gone on this offensive line, I don't think that you can count on that by any means.
Nope. No, I don't. And I also think that if he was completely healthy, he'd still should lose his job. But that, again, I'm saying those things based on potential and based on what I saw last year. I haven't seen anything this year. And that goes a long way. And to be honest with you, nobody's seen anything this year because all you've seen is a bunch of drill work. You know what I mean? Not you specifically. You know what I mean.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah. That's all anyone has seen. So we've seen 8 periods of practice and 2 periods of stretching.
And based on Brian's account, he you saw some guys doing some double team work and you saw some guys on the sled. Like, it's all well and good, but you haven't seen anything. You know what I mean? And so there's so much more out there to be won and to be figured out. And as much as we all want there to be a set offensive line and a set quarterback and all of those things, we're going to be talking about this for the next 6 months.
Yes, absolutely. So other side of the ball, Jason Onye, defensive tackle. He's got some extra weight that he's added since he's been back with the team this spring. And Al Washington talked a little bit about the impact of that today.
It has, man, and it's good weight. I think he's north of 300 for, I think it's the most he's ever weighed, but it's good weight. And I think it's helped him. I think he's stronger at the point of contact. I think it's almost like he's faster, to be honest with you. I credit Landau and Alexa Appleman. Like what they do, I think from a nutrition standpoint is next level. And you see it like guys like Bryce. Bryce is starting to fill out. He's a pup. I think he came here, he's probably in like the 50s. Now he's damn near 70. And he still looks like you wouldn't pick it up. But like, I think for Jason, going back to him, I think it's helped him. I think it's going to help him this season. And so I'm pleased with it.
He's about 20 pounds heavier. He was listed at 289 last year. He's up to 308 right now. And again, we're talking about defensive tackle. So
I always thought that Jason Onye looked like he was undersized to play defensive tackle.
Me too.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so him getting over 3 bills, I think, is pretty huge for him. And Al Washington is saying that he is not lost a step and he's actually faster. That's great news. Because he's a very athletic body that you can have on the inside who can make a lot of noise. So I like it. And
absolutely. And, I think that lack of, like, the fact that he was south of 300 pounds definitely worked against him, regardless of how agile he might have been. I mean, to play inside, you need to be in that 300-pound range because, the guys that you're going against on the other side of the ball are all tend to start off at around 300 pounds, if not, in the 310 to 320 range. So, I think that it's going to do nothing but help him, especially if he has kept that step the way that Al Washington has talked about. We might actually, it feels like, maybe Jason Onye finally becomes an impact type guy that we've sort of been waiting on for the last few years.
He's got the body for it now, because that was always the issue for a lot of these guys on the D line. It was that they just weren't big enough. If you're north of 300, you're big enough. So now you got to start making some plays. Excited to see what he brings to the table.
So Vince, we were just talking about the basketball transfer portal being open before the season is over with. And Scottie Pippen's son, Justin Pippen, is entering the transfer portal despite his school, Michigan, preparing to be in the Sweet 16 this weekend. What do you think of this development?
I hate it. I'm not gonna blame the kid completely. It's partly him, but I'm not gonna blame him completely because this is the system. And if you want the best landing spot, you got to get yourself in the portal and you got to put your name out there and all of those different things. Like, I get it. I hate that he has to make that decision. And it's fun. Oh God, if I'm his dad, I'm counseling him. Like, dude, you've got finish what you started. Like, you're
Right.
part of this team. Finish what you started. Then we'll worry about the transfer portal. Because if a team really wants you, they're going to find a spot for you. You know, that would be my
His
counsel.
name is going to open doors anyway.
100%.
The fact that he's Scottie Pippen's son, like
100%.
that is automatically going to at least let someone give you a look. And again,
And if there's a school that he's interested in and that might be interested in him, like, guess what, Scotty? You can pick up the phone, you can call him and talk to him and be like,
exactly,
he's going to enter the portal, but he's got some unfinished business with his team and he's going to finish it out. Because look, it's a little bit of a red flag if I'm a coach and I want to recruit you and you just quit on your team. Like, I
think so too. You're in the middle. You're one of 16 teams still playing that has a chance to win a national championship or at least go to the Final Four. And crazier things have happened. I mean, crazier things have happened at Michigan before when they've ended up in the Final Four. You know, so like, I don't understand why you couldn't wait a couple of weeks and like
maybe even just a few days. Like, just
depending, like, get through it with your team and then do it, because the portal is going to stay open for a while. But
yes, it's open for a month.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, to the question, like we were talking about this earlier this week, why the NCAA decided that the portal needs to be open now is beyond me. Like, as soon as the national championship game is over, open up the portal. It just, I don't understand why it needs to be open while the tournament is still going on. Makes no sense to me.
No, and because you're forcing these kids to make decisions that aren't good for their teams. And like I said, if I'm a coach looking to recruit somebody, I don't want a kid who's going to quit on their team. Now, I will.
No, and like, what if they end up being in the Final Four? Like, even if he's not playing that much, I think he's played in like 22 games or something like that. Even if he's not playing that much, like, wouldn't you want that experience to be on a team that went to the Final Four, even if you weren't playing that much?
100%. And I don't know if he stepped away from the team at this point. I would assume so. But if he has not stepped away from the team, like, that's a weird dynamic too. You know, there's so many issues with it and I realize there's only 16 teams out of over 300 that have this quandary that they're dealing with. I get that, but they shouldn't even have to deal with that quandary. Like, that shouldn't even be a thing. But if it was my kid, I'd still tell him, you need to finish with your team. Do not put your name in the portal.
I agree.
It's selfish.
I agree. Yep. Because again, you've got like 3 weeks after the season actually does end. You can still get in there. So Joe Buck, who was the voice of baseball on Fox TV for more than 2 decades, has only called one game since joining ESPN, one baseball game since joining ESPN 3 years ago. But he's going to call the season opener Thursday between the Yankees and the Milwaukee Brewers for ESPN as a special one-off. My question to you, Vince, scale of 1 to 10. How much have you missed Joe Buck calling baseball?
It is criminal that he's not calling baseball. So maybe that's something that he wanted in his contract with ESPN. I don't know, but he belongs behind the mic of a baseball game. That is where he shines. And the fact that he's only done one game in 3 years, I don't like it at all.
Yeah, it's 10 out of 10 to me because, like, in his absence, you know, are like, on a national level, are there any real play-by-play announcers who like Joe Davis, the guy who took his place? Like, he's okay, but he's not Joe Buck. Like, to me, baseball has really missed him over the, you know, because like Fox obviously gets the World Series and playoffs and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think that baseball has really missed Joe Buck. I know I have, as someone, you know, who loves baseball and watching baseball, especially, you know, when it comes to like playoff games, big games, and that kind of stuff. I think he's very sorely missed. But I think that, you know, like the quote that I read from him in an interview that he did, he basically said, like, he misses those big moments, playoffs, World Series. But when you're doing baseball, it takes 162 games first before you get to those moments. And,
True.
he's like my age. So he's been a while and he's done it for a long time. So like the grind of getting there just wasn't worth it for him anymore. And so that's kind of why he decided to step away from it.
So it's his decision. He needs to do some playoff games then. Something. I'm sorry.
Agree.
He's one of the better guys out there right now, and he needs to be doing games, period.
I think so as well. But ESPN won't be doing baseball after this season. So maybe he needs to get as many as he can this year, because who knows, when he'll work for a company that gives him the chance. TD4ND says Vin Scully was the best. Hard to argue. He was great. Chicago Cubs have a really good one in Pat Hughes.
Yes.
Doing radio. But I don't think there'll ever be another one. There won't be another one like Vin Scully again. The fact that he started doing it in the 1940s and did it for as long as he did. And then he did solo broadcasts that were simulcast on TV and radio. Like nobody else does that.
Nope.
Nobody. Harry Carey, a great one in his own right, Michael.
Apparently,
I agree.
Michael's really putting that.
He really likes Harry 3 times.
Driving it home, baby. Driving it home.
Christopher wants to know favorite announcer for any sport. His was Keith Jackson. Whoa, Nelly. Whoa, doctor. Do you have one?
Pat Hughes is one of my top ones.
Yeah.
Very much so. He's way up there for me. I hate to say it, but I've always been a Joe Buck fan. I have been, and he's so versatile. He's good at football. He's good at baseball. I don't associate him one over the other, but I think he's better at baseball. But those are probably my 2 top ones, to be perfectly honest with you.
I think so. Like, I miss Joe Buck, even though he's still doing Monday Night Football, obviously, I just miss him being with Fox.
Yes.
Because he did a greater variety of games every Sunday, whereas it's a fixed package when you're doing Monday Night Football. So when the Cowboys were good, and there were obviously a lot of 4:30 games that ended up on Fox, because, the NFC and all that kind of stuff. So they would do multiple Cowboys games a year. And I miss that.
Yep.
For sure. He might be he definitely is one of my all-time. I'm trying to think of anybody else that's really the older school. Brent Musburger was another one, but I don't know if I would put him, in that same echelon as a guy like Buck. It was just like the older school type guys. They were just a lot different, I guess, in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Play-by-play guys. And people have said, like Brian is saying, Charlie Jones, a little bit different, but that was, again, like Dick Enberg was another good one.
Yeah.
But, again, I think Buck is probably better. Someone said John Madden, but obviously he's like the analyst role and not the play-by-play guy.
He's a color guy.
Look,
Summerall and Madden was a good combination because Summerall knew how to corral John Madden, and they played off each other well and that kind of. So they were a good duo.
Summerall didn't want to talk all the time,
right?
And that opened the door for Madden to just be his kind of zany self, and do his thing with the telestrator and turkey legs and everything else. Yeah.
Mark, that's just mean.
Mark says, when college football news slows down, I should amuse myself by having a show giving Vince famous movie quotes and see how bad he is at it.
First of all, if they're famous movie quotes, I'd probably still do a pretty good job, even if I haven't seen the movie. I just want to say that. I do feel like I could do a lot of those. But yeah, seeing movies. Yeah.
Brian, I don't know why I didn't think of Al Michaels, but that's another good one. Especially in his prime, really good. I do feel like he is still good now, but that Thursday night booth just lacks so much sort of life and energy to me. I think it's definitely my least favorite of any of the number one booths on TV right now, that Thursday night booth. But 10 years ago, I think when it was Michaels and Collinsworth still, I would have put that right up there
Yeah,
with the
me
best
too.
of them.
Yep, I agree completely with that. I know Collinsworth annoys a lot of people. He doesn't bother me at all.
No, he doesn't bother me.
I think he's actually pretty solid.
I mean, he's kind of funny because, oh, Vince, this is just the greatest guy ever. Like everyone's the greatest guy.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
but he's still pretty good for the most part. All right, so one more sort of announcer type question. Dan Lebitard said on his show that the role of the ESPN sports anchor is less relevant in today's media. My question is, what's your Sports Center / highlight show viewing like now compared to, say, 20 years ago? Are you kind of in on what Lebitard is saying? What do you think?
I don't think he went very far out on the limb with that particular comment because SportsCenter anchors were like freaking rock stars back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
They just were. And I can't even tell you the last time I watched a SportsCenter. I haven't. Like,
do you ever stay up and watch Scott Van Pelt and his
sometimes? Like, unfortunately, I'm usually doing a show, and so I don't get to see him do his thing. But I don't mind him. I don't mind him doing. I don't mind him at all. I think he does a good job, and he would probably be considered a SportsCenter anchor at this point, based on what he does after those games and stuff.
Right.
But I like watching SportsCenter in the morning was my religious go-to every single morning, getting ready for school.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that whole deal, like that's what you did because you had no other way of knowing what the heck happened, across the country in all of the sports. And so, watching Dan Patrick and watching all those, like they were like Chris Berman and they were freaking rock stars back then. And that was must see TV. And it didn't matter when you started watching it. If you had an hour, you got to see everything because it was back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
And that's what I did every single morning. Every morning. Now I don't watch it at all. So it went from like must see TV to I don't give a crap.
And honestly, like especially probably starting after Stuart Scott passed away, like the people sitting in those chairs have just become more like one is much more like the next. There's not a whole lot of difference between any of them. And there's definitely, you have nowhere near the personalities like when you had Dan Patrick and Olbermann and Charlie Steiner and, like not Van Pelt, but I'm trying to think back. Why am I blanking on his name? Like what's it? The guy that was in Old School. You know who I'm talking about? He made a cameo at the kid's birthday party in Old School.
Oh,
Craig Kilborn. Thank you, DK. Craig Kilborn.
Yes.
Yeah. Like those were different personalities, and that was obviously the 90s. So it was even more than like 10 years ago. Personally, I think like the Scott Van Pelt Sports Center, like that is the best version of anything, in that little niche that ESPN has right now, because everything else, as we've kind of talked about before, is debate show. But what sets the Scott Van Pelt Sports Center apart is it's late night, so it's after the games. Now, I don't stay up and watch it either, because it is so late. Personally, like he's getting interviews after the games, after the game's in, he's getting these interviews. So he's actually having the people who had the big moments, on his show afterwards. Like if I was ESPN, that thing is running at like, what is it? Like 12 to 1 or, like midnight to 1 or whatever it is. Like it's late. Like I would be putting it on the next morning and, like just replaying it the next morning because it's better than the other sports centers that they're putting on, in the morning right now. Because I don't watch them either. Yeah.
But wasn't it must-see TV back in the day? Like,
oh, absolutely.
I mean,
like when I was in college and, and then, out of college and, working in sport, but like, it's obviously different now too, because of the proliferation of social media and the fact that you can for the most part, just pick up Twitter or whatever other, Instagram, and
You can find highlights instantly, and that wasn't always the case.
exactly.
Or it wasn't the case at all. If you wanted to see highlights of a team that you couldn't watch on TV, you had to watch SportsCenter, period.
Yep.
Like, you didn't have a choice.
Right.
That was the only place to go besides like your local news. And that was mostly garbage unless it was like high school stuff. You know what I mean? So yeah, SportsCenter was where it was at, man. And then they had the SportsCenter ads and the commercials and stuff. And like,
yeah,
it was
this is SportsCenter. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Those were fantastic. So it's a shame that like my kids have no clue what I would be talking about if I brought up SportsCenter. None.
Salty asking about the first years of Mike and Mike in the morning. He said they were worth being later to work.
I used to listen to them all the time, every single morning on my drive into work, every single morning. That was quality radio.
Yeah, and really, again, like if you want to talk about watered down products like ESPN radio, I don't even know what they've got on now. Like, it's the morning show. They still televise whatever their morning show is, and I think I've tried to watch it for maybe 10 seconds once. It's just, it's nothing like Mike and Mike. Not even close.
Once Mike and Mike left, they have tried so hard to fill that time slot with anything, and nothing has.
Like Golic and Wingo wasn't bad, but Mike and Mike was still better. But
Way
I mean,
better.
it's basically Greenberg decided he wanted to do something new and go be on TV instead of doing a radio show in the morning. See, DK is actually the smart one. He gets his news from IB Nation.
Smart man.
All right, well, that's going to do it for today. Appreciate you being here. Again, no evening show tomorrow because I'll be traveling and the other guys have some conflicts. We will be back Friday, though. I'll be coming to you from my hotel room in Birmingham. I think we're going to have a 3-man acoustical jam on Friday for the
Stereo,
Rapid Fire
baby.
Show. Yep. But look tomorrow for the interview with Sonia Citron. We will have that on our on all of our platforms, whether it be YouTube or whatever audio podcast platform that you happen to listen to. We'll have the Sonia Citron interview coming up tomorrow. So Vince, I will talk to you later. Everybody else,
Yes, sir.
talk to you later. Appreciate you as always. Good questions in the mailbag today, and we'll talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.